Aurora chuckled as she hooked her arms around my neck, pressing a fiery kiss onto my lips, as my eldest sister, Victoria, knelt before my McLaren, her face covered in mud and tears as she desperately begged for my forgiveness. I slammed on the gas. I roared past my so-called blood relatives, leaving them with nothing but endless regret and a cloud of exhaust. Welcome to Apex System, an exciting story is about to begin. Lincoln, you are truly a disappointment. Victoria's cold voice sliced through the dead air of the luxurious Upper East Side mansion like a dagger coated in ice. Dressed in a sharp, custom Armani suit, she stood with her arms crossed, looking down at me with nothing but blatant disgust in her eyes. Julian is just a child. As his older brother, not only did you steal his Harvard recommendation letter, but you intentionally pushed him down the stairs? The Vance family has no room for such malicious blood. Scarlett, the second sister, pushed up her gold-rimmed glasses, her tone sounding like a surgeon pronouncing a patient's death sentence. I stood in the center of the ornate Persian rug, my head buzzing. My gaze swept from Victoria's cold face to Scarlett, then to my third sister Harper, my fourth sister Riley, and finally landed on Julian, who was leaning weakly in the arms of my fifth sister, Chloe. Julian, my non-biological younger brother who had been adopted by the Vance family as a child. At this moment, an exaggerated piece of gauze was plastered across his forehead, and a few crocodile tears still clung to the corners of his eyes. He was secretly shooting me a provocative, smug look that only I could decipher. This scene was all too familiar. So familiar that it made my stomach churn with nausea. I took a sharp, deep breath of the air scented with premium French incense. Outside the window, a torrential rain was pouring down, accompanied by the roar of thunder. I have been reborn. Just 3 minutes ago, I was still in that Brooklyn slum that reeked of urine and rotting rats. On this night in my previous life, I had knelt on this very carpet, begging for 3 hours just to explain that damn misunderstanding. And what did I get in return? My sister's heartless expulsion. And Julian, who, in order to monopolize the family fortune, sent men to lock me inside my rental apartment and set it ablaze when I was at my lowest. The despair of fire searing my skin and smoke rotting my lungs feels as if it is still lingering in the marrow of my bones. In my past life, I lived like a dog wagging its tail for scraps, all for the sake of so-called family affection, only to be burned alive by that venomous snake. Ding! Strong resentment and indignation detected from the host. The peak system has been bound. Initial mission issued. Completely sever all ties with the Vance family. Mission reward, $10 million in initial funding and a superior physical enhancement. A cold, mechanical notification sound suddenly echoed in my mind. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, the cowardice and humility of my past life had been replaced by absolute coldness. Lincoln, are you still playing mute? My third sister, Harper, a top lawyer in New York, couldn't stand silence the most. She slammed a thick stack of documents onto the mahogany coffee table with a loud thud. This is the agreement to sever ties and a declaration waiving your inheritance rights. If you kowtow and apologize to Julian right now, I might consider giving you a $2,000 monthly allowance so you don't starve to death on the streets. No need. I finally spoke, my voice hoarse yet exceptionally calm. As those 3 words were uttered, the vast living room instantly fell into a deathly silence. Fifth sister Chloe's hand, which had been wiping away Julian's tears, froze mid-motion. Victoria frowned, as if she had heard some preposterous joke. What did you say? I said. There's no need. I walked straight to the coffee table, picked up Harper's $5,000 Montblanc pen, and without even glancing at the contents of the agreement, scribbled my name in 2 quick strokes. Lincoln Vance. No, from this day forward, I am simply Lincoln. I tossed the pen aside, the metal barrel clattering against the marble tabletop with a crisp snap, sounding like the fall of a guillotine severing the past. You're crazy? Harper's eyes widened, staring at me as if I were a monster. In their expectations, I should have been like a pathetic wretch, clinging to their legs and weeping bitterly. The smugness in Julian's eyes froze instantly. He clearly hadn't expected me to give up the surname that symbolized hundreds of billions in wealth so decisively. Since you've decided it was me who pushed her, then so be it. I took off the custom-made suit jacket bearing the Vance family crest and tossed it carelessly onto the sofa, leaving me in only a thin white shirt. I'll grant you your wish for a happy family of 6. I looked at Victoria, a mocking sneer curling my lips. But remember, today it is I who am discarding you. In the future, don't come crawling back to me. Lincoln, do you think playing hard to get will force us to compromise? Victoria's chest heaved with rage as she pointed toward the door and roared. Get out! Get out right now! I want to see how many days you can survive on the streets of New York without a penny to your name. As you wish, without a hint of regret. I turned around, strode toward the foyer, and pushed open the heavy, carved doors. The howling wind, mixed with icy torrential rain, instantly poured in, lashing against my face. Yet, it made me feel more sober and exhilarated than ever before. Ding! Mission accomplished. $10 million in initial funding has been remitted to the host's hidden Swiss bank account. Physical enhancement beginning. Accompanied by the system's notification. A surge of warmth instantly coursed through my body, dispelling the chill of the storm. I didn't look back, plunging headlong into the pitch-black rainy night of Manhattan. The Vance family? Julian, the game between us has only just begun. After leaving the Vance family's disgusting manor, I didn't wander aimlessly through the rain like a headless fly as I had in my past life. The system's physical enhancement made me feel as though my body were brimming with explosive power. Even the torrential rain pelting down felt insignificant. I hailed a taxi directly from the roadside and headed straight for Wall Street. Sitting in the back seat, I pulled out my phone to check the hidden Swiss bank account. Exactly $10 million lay there quietly. This was my starting stake for revenge. In my previous life, it was on this very night, 11 p.m. New York time, that an epic black swan event occurred on the Nasdaq. A chip giant named Starling Tech was exposed in a massive financial fraud scandal. Its stock flash crashed within just 10 minutes of the opening bell, plummeting by 80%. Before that, the company's stock had been the golden child, unanimously favored by every institution on Wall Street. I pulled up the trading software on my phone, a bloodthirsty sneer curling at the corners of my mouth. Without a moment's hesitation, I took that $10 million, applied 10 times leverage, and went all in shorting Starlink technology. $100 million short order was like a silent depth charge, dropped into the dark, surging undercurrents of the financial deep. Ding! The host has demonstrated extreme predatory behavior. The system has automatically masked this transaction's tracking to ensure absolute fund security. The system's voice sounded like it was crowning me at that moment. At 10:50 p.m., I walked into a top-tier private club near Wall Street called The Vault. You couldn't even get through the front door without a membership card. But I simply tucked a $100 bill into the doorman's hand. After catching a glimpse of my white shirt, which, though soaked, was clearly high-end bespoke, he respectfully held the door open. The lights in the club were dim, and jazz music flowed through the air. I walked straight to the bar and ordered a whiskey on the rocks. 11 o'clock sharp. The massive Bloomberg ticker above the bar suddenly flashed a piercing red light. Breaking news. Former CFO of Starlink Tech surrenders. Admits to $10 billion revenue fraud. The entire club instantly fell into a dead silence, followed by an explosion of panicked cursing. Countless Wall Street elites in suits pulled out their phones and began screaming frantically like ants on a hot pan. And I, watching the profit figures on my account jumping frantically at a rate of millions per second, picked up my wine glass and took a gentle sip. 150 million, 200 million, 300 million. I recited silently in my mind. In just half an hour, I had turned 10 million into 300 million US dollars. Just then, the crisp sound of high heels clicking against the marble floor came to a stop beside me. Good eye, or rather, you've got guts. A cold, slightly raspy, and sexy voice rang out. I turned my head, my breath hitching slightly. It was Aurora Sterling, the most mysterious and cold-blooded heiress on all of Wall Street, known as the Black Swan Queen. She wore a minimalist, deep V black silk gown draped with an expensive white cashmere coat. Those gray-blue eyes, resembling frozen lakes, were looking down at me with scrutiny, as if she could see through everything. In my past life, it was precisely because the Vance family offended the sterling conglomerate behind her that they were severely weakened in the subsequent trade wars. This was also one of the triggers that made Julian so desperate to kill me and seize power. Miss Aurora, a pleasure to meet you. I didn't stand up. I simply raised my glass, meeting her gaze without the slightest hint of avoidance. Aurora was clearly somewhat surprised by my poised and neither humble nor arrogant attitude. She narrowed her eyes slightly, her gaze falling on the unlocked trading interface on my phone screen, and her pupils contracted almost imperceptibly. 10 times leverage shorting Starlink? You're not just a man. You're an incredibly lucky one. She sat on the high stool next to me and casually ordered a martini. Who are you? Lincoln. An Avenger who was just kicked out of his family and is in desperate need of allies, I replied bluntly. Aurora let out a soft laugh, one devoid of any warmth. Kicked out? I remember now, the Vance family's notoriously useless eldest son. I heard that in a bid for favor. You pushed your own brother down the stairs? What? Are you planning to use this $300 million to buy back your sisters? Affection? Don't lump me in with that kind of mindless drama. I leaned in close, lowering my voice, my gaze burning into her flawlessly exquisite face. What I want is the total destruction of the Vance family. I know you've been eyeing the Vance Group's core AI project in Silicon Valley. I can help you secure it. In exchange, I need the resource channels of Sterling Ventures under your name. Aurora took a sip of her martini, her slender fingers tapping lightly on the bar. Her eyes scanned me like an X-ray, seemingly assessing whether I was an arrogant fool or a genuine monster. What makes you think I would trust an outcast who was just kicked out by his family? Because I can precisely snipe Starlink Tech tonight. I looked into her eyes, enunciating every word. And I also know exactly who Victoria Vance is meeting at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon for that Silicon Valley project. If she signs first, The Sterling family's tech portfolio will shrink by 20% this year. Aurora's fingers tapping on the bar came to a halt. She looked at me, a spark of dangerous excitement gradually igniting in her grayish-blue eyes. Deal. She reached out her hand, adorned with black nail polish, and shook mine. Lincoln, I hope you're not playing with fire. It's a pleasure doing business with you. I gripped her cold, soft hand firmly, a confident smile playing on my lips as if everything were under my control. Don't worry, the fire will only consume those self-righteous fools. The next day at 1:30 p.m., inside the presidential suite on the top floor of the Four Seasons Hotel Manhattan, dressed in the Armani Prive suit sent over by Aurora, I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the concrete jungle. In my mind, the system's holographic projection was running at high speed, thoroughly analyzing the background of the opponent Victoria Vance was about to negotiate with. Ding! Target, David Chen, founder of a rising Silicon Valley AI startup. Core demand. Urgently needs $50 million to bridge the funding gap for underlying architecture R&D. Fatal weakness. The Alpha computing model, currently under secret development by his company, has a patent ownership dispute. The Vance Group's contract contains hidden bully clauses, intended to forcibly acquire the patent in the future. I let out a cold sneer. Victoria was still maintaining the same arrogant, winner-takes-all style from my previous life. Her greed was truly unsightly. Ready. My new partner? Aurora emerged from the inner room of the suite. Today, she wore a deep blue professional suit paired with red-bottomed heels, radiating a suffocating sense of authority. The show is about to begin. I turned around and handed her the document provided by the system, which highlighted the traps in the Vance Group contract. As long as this gets to David Chen, Victoria's Silicon Valley dream will be completely shattered right here in Manhattan. Aurora scanned the document, a flicker of surprise crossing her gray-blue eyes before turning into unabashed admiration. Lincoln, I'm starting to get curious about your intelligence network. You actually managed to get the original copy of these predatory clauses, something even the Sterling family's corporate spies couldn't uncover. That's my secret, Your Majesty. I smiled as I held the suite door open for her. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we appeared punctually outside the VIP business conference room on the second floor of the hotel. Through the translucent frosted glass door, I could clearly see Victoria sitting at the negotiating table. She maintained her usual regal, superior posture, pushing a thick contract toward a middle-aged man opposite her who wore black-rimmed glasses and looked somewhat exhausted. David, a $50 million capital injection. No one in all of New York except the Vance Group can wire that to you within 3 days. Sign it, and your AI company survives. Victoria's voice drifted through the crack in the door, laced with an unquestionable arrogance. David Chen picked up the pen, his hand trembling slightly, clearly having reached the end of his rope. Thud! I pushed open the conference room doors without the slightest hint of politeness, the loud crash shattering the oppressive atmosphere inside. Victoria whipped her head around. When she realized it was me, the shock in her eyes instantly curdled into fury and disdain. Lincoln? What is a loser like you doing here? Who gave you permission to enter? Where is security? Throw him out! Ignoring her screeching, which reminded me of a hen guarding its food, I walked straight up to David Chen, pulled out a chair, and sat down. I casually tossed the documents Aurora had handed me onto the table in front of him. Mr. Chen, before you sign that indentured servitude agreement, I suggest you take a look at the hidden clause 73 in the Vance Group's contract addendum. Once your Alpha computing model is successfully developed, Vance Group will have the absolute right to unilaterally and forcibly acquire the patent. The life's work you've poured your heart into will become nothing more than Victoria Vance's personal toy. David Chen's expression shifted drastically upon hearing this. He snatched the document, his face turning paler with every line he read. Finally, he looked at Victoria, trembling all over. Miss Vance, is this true? You actually intend to buy out my billion-dollar patent for a mere $50 million? David, let me explain. This is just a standard legal precaution. Victoria panicked instantly. She couldn't fathom how this core secret, locked away in a safe, had been leaked. There's no need for explanations. Aurora walked elegantly into the conference room in her high heels, standing behind me and looking down at Victoria. Mr. Chen, I am Aurora Sterling. Mr. Lincoln here represents Sterling Ventures in presenting a new offer to you. A $100 million unconditional investment. No interference with patent ownership. And we only request a 30% equity stake. The Sterling family? Victoria looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She stared fixedly at Aurora and me, her voice shrill and cracking. Lincoln, have you lost your mind? You're actually teaming up with outsiders to sabotage your own sister's business? Big sister? I stood up, leaning my hands on the negotiation table as I looked down at her with a cold gaze. Victoria, have you forgotten? Last night, when you kicked me out into the torrential rain, I had already signed the severance agreement. Now, I am your competitor. I turned my head toward David Chen. Mr. Chen, my offer is valid for 1 minute. I'll sign with Sterling Venture Capital right now. David Chen grabbed the opportunity like a lifeline, tossing the Vance Group's contract into the trash without a moment's hesitation. You people. Victoria was shaking with rage, her exquisite makeup now appearing utterly hideous. She pointed at me, growling through gritted teeth. Lincoln, don't think for a second that clinging to the Sterling family's coattails means you've won. You will always be nothing but a piece of trash fit only for the gutters. Is that so? I walked up to her, a mocking curve tugging at the corner of my mouth. In a voice audible only to the two of us, I whispered, go back and tell Julian that this is just the beginning. I'm going to make him, and all of you, savor the taste of losing everything. Bit by bit, watching Victoria flee the conference room in disgrace with her assistant in tow, a surge of exhilaration erupted within me like a volcano. In my past life, you stood high above, grinding me under your heel. In this life, I will make you watch with your own eyes as your empire comes crashing down. Ding! Detected that the host is reviewing Vance Group's overseas account statements. The target firewall has been automatically breached, and the complete chain of evidence regarding Julian Vance's embezzlement of family charitable funds has been extracted. I sat on the expansive leather sofa in Aurora's Manhattan penthouse, looking at the dense records of fund transfers on the tablet, and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Julian, that fool, in my past life, he used this money to hire assassins to kill me. In this life, this money will become the first noose to strangle him. You're smiling like a demon preparing to feast on its prey. Aurora walked over carrying 2 cups of pour-over coffee, handing one to me. What did you find? I found out how a perfect good boy, younger brother managed to wash $20 million of orphanage donations into his private Cayman Islands accounts within 3 years. I took the coffee and pushed the tablet toward her. Aurora glanced at the intricate structures of offshore companies and let out a cold snort. The technique is crude. If those women in the Vance family who pride themselves on being elites can't even see through this, then they deserve to go bankrupt. It's not that they can't see it. It's that their eyes are blinded by the filter of family ties. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the bustling New York City streets. In my past life, no matter how I tried to prove my innocence, they thought I was lying. Since that's the case, I won't say a word this time. I'll let the evidence speak for itself. I opened an encrypted email account and dragged in 2 specially processed financial statement attachments organized by the system. One was sent to New York's top attorney, my third sister, Harper Vance. The other was sent to the chief surgeon at New York Presbyterian Hospital, my second sister, Scarlett Vance. These 2 files contain no sender information and no unnecessary fluff, only cold, hard data and remittance vouchers. Meanwhile, inside the Vance law firm located in the heart of Wall Street, Harper sat at her massive mahogany desk, rubbing her aching temples. Her eldest sister Victoria's crushing defeat on the Silicon Valley project yesterday had not only cost the Vance Group dearly but had also left her, as chief legal counsel, completely overwhelmed. Ding. An anonymous email popped up on the computer screen. Harper had intended to delete it immediately, but the subject line, overseas money laundering records of the Vance Family Charitable Foundation, caught her eye in bold letters, causing her hand on the mouse to freeze. Driven by professional instinct, she clicked on the attachment. At first, her expression held a hint of disdain, assuming it was just another prank by some bored hacker. But as she cross-referenced the transfer accounts and timestamps, the color began to drain from her face bit by bit. This is impossible, Harper murmured to herself, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she pulled up the family's internal charitable foundation accounts for comparison. A perfect match. Every massive sum claimed to be for medical aid for impoverished children in Africa had, after being funneled through 3 offshore accounts, ultimately been deposited into a private account named J.V., and there was no one else J.V. could be but Julian Vance. Harper slumped back against her chair, finding it difficult to even breathe. The logic she took such pride in was being assaulted by madness. Could her younger brother, the one who was always gentle and well-behaved in front of them, who would be heartbroken for ages just by stepping on an ant, actually be a bold and reckless thief? Just then, the intercom on the desk rang. Harper, did you get that email? On the other end of the line, Scarlett's voice sounded unusually tense, carrying a faint, almost imperceptible tremor. You received it too? Harper took a deep breath, struggling to keep her voice sounding calm. 10 minutes ago, I checked one of the so-called medical device suppliers involved in those wire transfer records. It's nothing but a shell company. The registered address is an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn. As a top surgeon, Scarlett possessed a natural sensitivity to medical industry data. Harper, tell me, what exactly is going on? Why would Julian do this? I don't know, Scarlett, but I'm going to find out. Harper's gaze sharpened. Until we have clarity, don't tell Victoria, and definitely don't alert Julian. However, what they didn't know was that once the seeds of panic are sown, they take root and sprout with alarming speed. That night, at the Vance estate, Julian sat in his luxurious bedroom, leisurely sipping a glass of red wine, with Lincoln, that great thorn in his side, finally removed. He felt as if the entire world had become peaceful. In just a few more months, Once he had complete control over the family's finances, these 5 foolish women would no longer be of any use to him. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock at the door. Scarlet pushed it open and walked in. Sister Scarlet, what brings you here? Julian immediately masked his expression with a charming, dutiful smile. He set down his wine glass and went to greet her. Is work getting too exhausting? Here, let me massage your shoulders for you. In the past, Scarlet would have stroked his head with tender affection, but tonight, she simply watched him in silence, her gaze devoid of its usual doting warmth, replaced instead by a chilling, scrutinizing edge. Julian, you told me last month that the shipment of surgical instruments allocated by the Charity Foundation to the East African Hospital had arrived. Right. Scarlet's voice was soft, yet it scraped against Julian's nerves like a blade. The smile on Julian's face stiffened for a fraction of a second before he quickly masked it. Yes, sister. I even made a point of reading the thank you letters from over there. Why do you ask? It's nothing. Scarlet gave him a long, searching look. Get some rest. As Julian watched Scarlet turn and walk away, the smile on his face vanished instantly, replaced by an overwhelming sense of panic, as if he were being stared down by a venomous snake. He had a faint, unsettling feeling that an invisible net was silently tightening around him. Saturday night, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, the annual Starlight Gala, a premier charity event, was getting underway. The gala brought together Wall Street's financial titans, Hollywood's A-list stars, and powerful political figures. As one of New York's established elite families, the Vance family was naturally the center of attention. I walked into the magnificent banquet hall with Aurora on my arm. Tonight, she wore a stunning dark red backless evening gown, looking like a poisonous rose blooming in the dead of night. Beside her, in my custom-tailored black tuxedo, I looked as if I were born to stand at this pinnacle of power. Lincoln? Not long after entering the hall, a voice filled with shock and disgust came from ahead. It was my eldest sister, Victoria. Standing beside her were my second sister Scarlet, my third sister Harper, and the star of tonight's banquet, Julian, dressed in a white suit and looking every bit the noble prince. You're a disgraced outcast who was purged from the family. What right do you have to be here? Victoria glared at me, her voice low and teeth clenched. What are the security guards doing? Get out of here now. And stop embarrassing the Vance family. Miss Victoria, it seems you not only have poor taste but also a failing memory. Aurora shot her a cold glance. Mr. Lincoln is currently the chief investment consultant for the Sterling Consortium, as well as my date for the evening. I don't believe anyone here would dare to kick out a guest of the Sterling family. As soon as these words were spoken, several nearby tycoons who had overheard the commotion cast surprised glances their way. Victoria's face instantly turned a shade of pale green and white. Yet she couldn't muster a single word in rebuttal. Julian looked at me, a flicker of panic crossing his eyes, but he quickly replaced it with a look of aggrieved innocence, shrinking behind Scarlet. Brother, if you're doing this because you're jealous of me, I'm willing to give everything back to you. Just please, stop making our sisters angry. In my past life, I would have been nauseated to the point of vomiting by this hypocritical act. But now, I only saw him as a pathetic clown. Save your tears, Julian. You're going to need them soon. Without so much as a glance at him, I led Aurora straight toward the VIP seats with the best view in the house. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the climax of the gala, the charity auction, officially began. Julian took to the main stage as the representative of the Vance family, holding the microphone. He spoke with deep emotion about the Vance family's selfless dedication to the East African Children's Medical Aid Project. Just last month, we wired another $5 million in donations to East Africa. Seeing those children smile again makes me feel the weight of the responsibility the Vance family carries. Julian delivered his impassioned speech on stage, met by thunderous applause from the audience. Victoria looked at him with eyes full of pride, while Harper and Scarlet's faces turned unusually pale. They glanced at each other, their eyes filled with unease. It's time. I leaned back in my chair and issued a command to the system in my mind. Take over all the audiovisual equipment at the dinner party and release that surprise. Ding! Command received. System intrusion complete. Playback will begin in 10 seconds. At the very moment Julian was preparing to bow and step off the stage to accept the accolades, the soft lighting in the hall suddenly went completely dark. What's going on? Is there a power outage? A stir rippled through the crowd. Immediately after, the massive LED screen behind the stage, intended for displaying auction items, snapped to life. The blinding white light forced everyone to squint instinctively. On the screen, there were no luxury jewels on display. Instead, there were bank statements clear enough to be chilling, offshore company registration documents, and several encrypted call recordings. I stood up and snapped my fingers, and a spotlight instantly hit me. I picked up a microphone I had swiped at some point, and my voice, deep and piercing, echoed throughout the entire hall. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for interrupting this touching moment. Since Master Julian mentioned the medical aid project in East Africa, I feel it is necessary for everyone to see exactly where this $5 million and the $20 million in donations from the past 3 years, has actually been aided. The room fell into a dead silence. Everyone's gaze shifted back and forth between the screen and Julian. The images on the screen began to scroll automatically, accompanied by my cold narration. The first installment, $3 million, was transferred to a private account in the Cayman Islands through a shell medical company called Light of Hope. The second installment, $5 million, after passing through money laundering channels in Switzerland and Luxembourg, turned into a priceless luxury villa in Long Island. Shut up! Turn it off! This is a forgery! This is a frame-up! Julian screamed like a madman on stage, desperately trying to pull the power cord for the screen. But his meager strength was completely useless. Is this real? Below the stage, Victoria stood frozen as if struck by lightning, staring in disbelief at the confidential Vance family accounts displayed on the screen. Harper and Scarlett, meanwhile, completely broke down. The anonymous emails they had received a few days ago had just been given the most lethal public confirmation. The evidence is irrefutable. Forgery? You can save those words for the FBI. I sneered, my gaze piercing Julian on stage like a blade. Julian Vance, you built your flawless prince persona on the backs of countless orphans, using their life-saving money. Tonight, I'm tearing that mask off for you. The hall erupted in an instant. Camera flashes strobed frantically as reporters surged forward like sharks scenting blood. No, this isn't true. Sisters, you have to believe me. Lincoln framed me. It was him. Julian scrambled off the stage, crawling and stumbling as he tried to grab Victoria's hand. Slap! A crisp, sharp slap echoed through the hall. Victoria was trembling all over as she delivered a forceful backhand across Julian's face. She looked at this good little brother she had doted on for over a decade. Her eyes filled with nothing but bone-chilling coldness and the fury of betrayal. Don't call me sister. You make me sick. Watching the scene unfold, I raised my champagne glass and offered a distant toast to the farce below. The collapse of the Vance family has officially begun. The scandal at the charity gala completely ignited the New York media. The Vance family's stock hit the circuit breaker and halted trading within less than half an hour of Monday's opening. And the FBI's Financial Crimes Division officially launched an investigation into Julian's case. The building is about to collapse. I stood before the panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows on the 88th floor of the Sterling Consortium headquarters, looking down at the traffic below, scurrying like ants. Julian is missing. Aurora pushed open my office door and tossed the top-secret report onto my desk. The FBI searched Vance Manor and several of his private properties, but found no one. The women of the Vance family are searching for him like they've gone mad. He won't get away. I turned around, a cold curve tugging at the corner of my mouth. In my mind, the system's radar had already locked onto that red dot. Ding! The target, Julian Vance, is currently hiding in an underground warehouse at an abandoned pier on 14th Street in Brooklyn. He has just contacted the notorious local Viper gang through the black market network in an attempt to hire an assassin. The target, the host. What an unoriginal fool. In my past life, he burned me to death. In this life, driven to a dead end, he can still only come up with such low-life tactics. He contacted a Brooklyn gang. I looked at Aurora, a flash of killing intent crossing my eyes. Prepare an armored vehicle. We're going to pick up this stray dog. A spark of excitement flashed in Aurora's grayish-blue eyes. I would be delighted to see what kind of tricks this cornered rat can still pull off. Late night, an abandoned pier in Brooklyn. The gale, carrying the briny scent of seawater, whistled through the gaps between the empty shipping containers. Julian hid inside a drafty warehouse. His once immaculate white suit was now caked in mud and grime, his hair a disheveled mess, looking every bit like a literal stray dog. He was currently negotiating with a scarred, burly gang leader who had a tattoo sprawling across his bald head. Every detail of this scene was being captured clearly by a system-controlled microdrone, the footage streaming in real time to a screen inside the bulletproof Rolls-Royce parked several hundred meters away. Simultaneously, using the system's hacking capabilities, I quietly patched into the private phones of Victoria, Scarlett, and Harper, activating the speakerphone for them to listen in. $2 million. As long as you help me take out that bastard Lincoln. This money is yours. On the screen, Julian's voice was hysterical, carrying a spine-chilling madness. $2 million? Master Vance, you're currently wanted globally by the FBI. Risking it all for $2 million is a bit much, don't you think? The bald leader exhaled a cloud of cigar smoke and let out a cold sneer. My accounts are frozen. This is all the cash I have left. Julian suddenly grabbed the bald man's arm, his face contorted in a hideous grimace. Listen, I want him to die a miserable death. Tie him up in the shittiest slum apartment in Brooklyn. Douse him in gasoline. And burn him alive. Just like I planned from the start. Make him watch himself turn to ashes bit by bit. As soon as these words were spoken, 3 women in different corners of Manhattan were simultaneously struck as if by a bolt of lightning. He actually wanted to burn Lincoln to death? Scarlett's voice on the other end of the line was trembling uncontrollably, and her muffled sobs could be heard faintly. That animal. Victoria's voice carried an unprecedented sense of despair and weakness. But it wasn't enough. I stared coldly at the screen, quietly waiting for him to reveal his final card. You seem to really hate that brother of yours. The bald leader seemed to find it quite amusing. Hate? Of course I hate him. If it weren't for him, the Vance family fortune would have been mine alone long ago. Julian completely tore off his mask, laughing maniacally. Those 5 stupid women, did they really think I saw them as my sisters? I merely treated them as ATMs and stepping stones, with just a few fake tears. They kicked that true bloodline out of the house like a dog. What a pity I couldn't kill him sooner. Julian's words were like a rusty saw, hacking ruthlessly at the hearts of the Vance women, shredding their last remaining shreds of illusion and pride into pieces. All right, close the net. I cut off the communication on my phone and turned to look at Aurora. Aurora snapped her fingers and issued a cold command into her headset. Sterling family guards, move out. Drag that rat out and pack him up for the FBI. In less than a minute, dozens of fully armed men in black surrounded the warehouse like ghosts. A few muffled thuds and Julian's terrified screams echoed from within, followed by a heavy silence, when 2 of the men dragged Julian out of the warehouse like a dead dog and tossed him in front of my bulletproof car. He had already wet his pants in terror. I rolled down the window and looked down at him from my seat. Julian, you lost. My voice was calm, without a hint of emotion. Enjoy the rest of your life in prison. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, your dear sisters heard every single word of that brilliant speech you just gave. Julian jerked his head up, his eyes fixed on me, filled with extreme terror and despair. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but not a single sound came out. I rolled up the car window, completely shutting this piece of trash out of my world. Drive. A week had passed since the incident at the abandoned pier that night. Over these 7 days, New York's high society experienced a massive earthquake. Julian Vance was formally arrested by the FBI on multiple felony charges, including large-scale money laundering and solicitation of murder. Denied bail. He is destined to spend the remainder of his life in a federal maximum security prison. Meanwhile, under the impact of the scandals and the ruthless suppression by the Sterling Consortium, the Vance Group's capital chain completely snapped. Victoria's proud business empire collapsed overnight. Scarlett was suspended from the hospital pending investigation for procedural violations. Harper's law license faced revocation, and Riley and Chloe lost all their resources and prestige following the family's bankruptcy. The once lofty Vance family had now become the laughingstock of all New York. On Friday evening, the Manhattan sky turned ominously dark as a rare rainstorm poured down. Fierce winds whipped pea-sized raindrops, slamming them violently against the city's concrete forest. I was driving the black McLaren P1, with Aurora in the passenger seat, preparing to pull into the underground garage of our penthouse apartment next to Central Park. Just as the car was about to turn into the private driveway, 5 stumbling figures suddenly burst out from the curtain of rain, throwing themselves directly in front of the car. With a piercing screech of brakes, the McLaren came to a halt less than half a meter away from them. I narrowed my eyes slightly, peering through the rain-blurred windshield to get a clear look at the scene outside. They are my 5 dear sisters. Victoria, the once overbearing eldest sister, now had disheveled hair and was soaked to the bone. Her once expensive Chanel suit was caked in mud. Scarlett, Harper, Riley, and Chloe were also like drowned rats, huddling together and shivering in the torrential rain. The exquisite makeup on their faces had long been washed away by the rain, leaving behind nothing but endless exhaustion and despair. With a heavy thud, Victoria fell straight to her knees in front of the McLaren's hood. Mud splashed across her face, but she no longer cared. She pounded on the hood with trembling hands, crying out at the top of her lungs. Her voice came through the car window as a muffled wail. Lincoln, please, roll down the window. I know I was wrong. We all know we were wrong. Immediately after, Scarlett, Harper, and even the habitually proud Chloe all followed suit, kneeling down in the pouring rain. Lincoln, we were blind. We were deceived by that animal. Julian, Scarlett sobbed heart-wrenchingly. Please, can you forgive us? If you just forgive us, we'll listen to everything you say from now on. Our family can start over. Start over? I sat in the warm, comfortable car, watching this farcical scene outside, feeling nothing but utter absurdity. In my past life, the Lincoln who was choking on thick smoke and fire in that dilapidated Brooklyn apartment had also desperately begged for your trust. But what did you do? You were in your luxury villa, laughing and chatting while embracing that murderer. What? Feeling soft-hearted? Aurora, sitting in the passenger seat, turned her head, a playful glint of a smile in her grayish-blue eyes. I just feel like the rain isn't heavy enough yet. I sneered. I didn't roll down the window, nor did I push open the car door to perform some melodramatic display of sibling affection. I simply watched Victoria's face, twisted in regret, in silence, as my eldest sister, Victoria, knelt in the mud before my McLaren, crying out in despair for my forgiveness and attempting a final struggle using our hollow blood ties. Aurora leaned in with a light laugh. She extended her slender arms, possessively hooking them around my neck, and pressed a fiery, territorial kiss onto my lips. This kiss was the most lethal mockery directed at those 5 pathetic wretches outside. As the kiss ended, I looked at the faces outside the car, completely shattered by shock and humiliation, with eyes that remained entirely indifferent. Sorry, you've got the wrong person, I murmured silently to myself. Then, expressionless, I shifted into gear and slammed my right foot down on the accelerator. Boom! The McLaren erupted with the deafening roar of a beast. A powerful blast of air, mixed with the muddy water kicked up by the tires, splashed mercilessly onto Victoria and the others. With a sharp turn of the steering wheel, the sports car streaked like a bolt of black lightning, swerving around the figures kneeling on the ground and driving straight into the underground garage. Left behind for them was nothing but the freezing rain, endless regret, and the acrid sting of exhaust fumes. Back in the penthouse, I stood side by side with Aurora in front of the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a glass of red wine. Piercing through the curtain of rain, I could still faintly see those 5 figures below, small as ants, still kneeling in place, refusing to leave. From this day forward, the Vance family no longer exists in New York, Aurora said, gently swirling her glass, her tone sounding like a final sentence. No, I said, looking at my own cold reflection in the glass window. Only a brand new empire that belongs to me. 3 months later, the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of New York. As the judge's heavy solid wood gavel fell with a dull thud, it marked a humiliating end to the Vance family's century of glory. I hereby declare that the Vance Group has officially entered bankruptcy liquidation proceedings. All of its core assets, real estate, and intangible assets will be acquired in full by the highest bidder, Apex Capital. Victoria, sitting in the very last row of the gallery, felt as if the last shred of her strength had been drained away upon hearing the verdict. Collapsing onto the hard wooden bench, her blonde hair, which she used to wear in a high, elegant bun, was now graying and brittle. Those eyes, once brimming with arrogance, held nothing but dullness and emptiness. Scarlett, Harper, and the others hadn't even found the courage to appear in court. They were now huddled in a cramped low-rent apartment in Queens, scraping by on odd jobs, and I sat in the best seat in the house, the plaintiff's table, watching it all with cold indifference. Apex Capital, this was the investment empire I had built using the first pot of gold earned through the system, combined with the channels provided by Aurora. Stepping out of the courthouse doors, the late autumn sun of New York felt piercing and cold. How does it feel? The final terminator of the Vance family? Aurora leaned against a black McLaren, handing me a cup of freshly bought hot coffee. Today, she wore a wine-red trench coat and bold red lipstick, looking breathtakingly beautiful. It was just clearing out a pile of stinking trash, I said, taking a sip of the coffee. The truly interesting game is only just beginning. Ding! Main quest, Destroy the Vance Family, has been perfectly completed. Quest rating, SSS. Reward, absolute control over the world's top financial information network. Peak system, upgraded to version 2.0. In my mind, the system's notification tone was clearer and more pleasant than ever before. I could feel an unimaginably massive torrent of data converging within my brain. If I so desired, the hidden cards of any Wall Street tycoon would be as transparent to me as a blank sheet of paper. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we arrived at 1 Wall Street. This iconic skyscraper, which once belonged to the Vance Group, now bore the massive gilded signage of Apex Capital. In the lobby, the oil paintings and sculptures that once belonged to the Vance family had been completely cleared away, replaced by modern and imposing holographic data projections. Holding Aurora's hand, I walked into the top-floor chairman's office that was now exclusively mine. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the entirety of Manhattan's bustle was laid out before us. From the shimmering waters of the Hudson River to the towering heights of the Empire State Building, everything lay beneath our feet. I just finished reviewing your next phase and a proposal. Aurora walked over to the desk and casually flipped open a thick file, her gray-blue eyes shimmering with the light of ambition. Swallowing the 3 major traditional energy giants in Europe and expanding into deep space exploration. Lincoln, your appetite is even larger than I imagined. Since I've reached this position, I might as well leave something behind for the world. I walked up behind her, wrapping my arms around her slender waist and resting my chin lightly on her shoulder. Besides, I have the smartest queen in the world as my partner. Aurora turned around, hooking her arms around my neck, the smile at the corners of her mouth both charming and dangerous. Let me correct you, not just a partner. This building, this empire, and you, half of it all belongs to me. Of course. I leaned down to kiss her, asserting our sovereignty within this office that symbolized the pinnacle of power. At this moment, the holographic projection screen on the desk lit up, displaying real-time data from major global stock markets. With the system's enhancement, those intersecting red and green lines were no longer cold numbers in my eyes, but a staircase leading to endless wealth and power. In my past life, I died like a pathetic wretch in the raging fires of the slums. In this life, I was reborn from a stormy night. I personally severed those nauseating shackles of kinship, sent the traitors to hell, and trampled the once lofty enemies beneath my feet. My name is Lincoln. In this cold and cruel world, I no longer pray for anyone's mercy. Alongside Aurora, I will use absolute strength and an iron fist to establish an era of supremacy that no one dares to challenge in this ultimate gladiator arena known as Wall Street. The Mediterranean sun always pours unreservedly over these azure waters. I lay on the open-air top deck of the Zenith super yacht, letting the warm sea breeze brush over me. This private vessel, costing $500 million, was currently anchored quietly off the coast of Monaco. 3 years have passed since the total annihilation of the Vance family. Over these 3 years, by leveraging the upgraded version 2.0 of the Peak system, alongside Aurora Sterling's terrifyingly efficient capital operations skills, Peak Capital has long since crossed the boundaries of Wall Street. It has become an invisible empire with tentacles extending into global energy, cutting-edge technology, and deep space exploration. Ding! System notification. The European New Energy Network previously laid out by the host has completed its final merger. It is estimated to bring over $12 billion in net profit to Peak Capital next quarter. Current global rich list ranking. Hidden, actual controlled assets have surpassed the top spot. In my mind, the system's voice remained as precise and emotionless as ever. I picked up the chilled champagne beside me and took a gentle sip. The Lincoln who was once kicked out onto the streets penniless in the freezing torrential rain of Manhattan felt like a lifetime ago. Now, I only need to move a finger while lying on a lounge chair to decide the economic trajectory of a country on the other side of the globe. Enjoying that invincible loneliness all by yourself again, Mr. Lincoln? A voice laced with lazy amusement drifted from behind. Aurora approached, barefoot on the teak deck, wearing a white silk bikini under a sheer, lightweight cover-up. The sunlight cast a dazzling halo over her blonde hair, and in those gray-blue eyes, the icy ruthlessness of the business world had faded, replaced by a tenderness reserved only for me. I was thinking it's time to buy that private island we scouted in the Caribbean, I said with a smile, reaching out to pull her into my arms and settle her across my lap. Didn't you say winters in New York are too boring? Buying an island? You make it sound as casual as picking up a can of coffee from the convenience store downstairs, Aurora said, wrapping her arms around my neck as her long fingers lightly traced my cheek. But I agree. Even the CEO of Pinnacle Capital needs a vacation. We exchanged a knowing smile. In this world, only we truly understand each other's ambitions, and only we can stand side by side at this height to appreciate the same view. Just then, the yacht's smart butler system projected a holographic screen. It was the daily briefing sent by my personal assistant. One inconspicuous piece of local news caught my eye. Former New York socialite Victoria Vance was arrested on the spot by police for allegedly stealing several pieces of cheap steak from a supermarket chain in Brooklyn. The news was accompanied by a blurry photo. The woman in the picture had graying hair and a hunched frame, wearing a filthy, tattered overcoat. Her eyes were filled with terror and numbness. In the corner of the report, it also mentioned her sisters. Scarlett had been working odd jobs at an illegal clinic that was recently shut down, and Harper had her legs broken by a gang over debt issues and was now reduced to begging on the streets. As for Julian, the one they had coddled and hailed as the perfect heir, he had his spine shattered in a prison gang fight last year. Now, he was nothing more than a broken shell of a man, lingering on the brink of death in a prison infirmary. Still reading news about that trash? Aurora glanced at the screen and, with a casual wave of her hand, shut off the holographic projection. I just happened to see it, I said flatly, without a ripple of emotion in my heart. Whether it was hatred or pity, it all seemed utterly meaningless to me now. A dragon does not concern itself with the struggles of ants in the mire. In my world, there had long since ceased to be a place for them. Don't let those insignificant people ruin the mood. Aurora lowered her head, her warm lips pressing against my collarbone, sending a tingling, electric sensation through me. The Prince of Monaco is hosting a private dinner at the palace tonight, and he specifically requested the presence of the head of Apex Capital. Shall we go? Let's go. I wrapped my hands around her slender waist and looked past the yacht's railing toward the brilliant sunset on the distant horizon. Since they want to meet the true king, how could we possibly miss it? I stood up, swept Aurora into my arms, and carried her toward the yacht's luxurious master bedroom amidst her startled cry. The shadows of the past had long since been evaporated by the fierce Mediterranean sun. Now, I possessed unparalleled wealth, absolute power, and the most perfect lover in the world. This is my very own ultimate era of peak happiness. The end.